It's 2020, a year everything seems to be getting canceled. From school, to March Madness, to Coachella. But one thing is still on, and that's this year we'll be voting for who we want to be the next president of the United States. Now, for this reason, you've probably heard people say, it's an election year. And while that is true, the one thing to take away from this lesson is that every year is an election year. Today, we're popping open the hood to take a look at the engine that keeps American politics running. Elections and voting. My name's Alex Demircan, and welcome to this Big Little Lesson. Alright, so taking a look at our lesson plan, we are in the second lesson right now on elections and voting, and in my opinion, this is arguably the most important lesson of all of them. The idea is that it will help you approach election day, help you understand what is going to be on the ballot, and why it is important to participate through voting. So, we're going to begin with answering this one question: when is election day? It shouldn't surprise anyone that this is the most important day we're going to be looking at in this lesson. And the election day is always going to be the first Tuesday in November, but it cannot be November 1st. So if Tuesday falls on the 1st, then it's going to be the second Tuesday in the month. The date's going to change. It's not like Christmas, which is always going to be the same one every year. So election day will always be between the 2nd and the 8th of November. Every year it's going to be one of those days, and every year there will be an election happening on that day. So just to run through a little introduction, to cover the groundwork in terms of what elections are, what voting is, who manages elections. So as a voter, all you really think about is taking a little bit of time out of your day, going, voting, walking out, and that's the end of it. But there is a big process that goes into planning it and making sure they run smoothly. So at the state level, this is organized by the Secretary of the State, which in Connecticut is an elected statewide executive position. They're really a head administrator of sorts. They oversee a lot of administrative governmental functions, and overseeing elections is the big thing here. And at the municipal level, there's always going to be some body. In Connecticut, this is the Registrar of Voters. Each town is going to have two, one Republican, one Democrat, who work together. Some other places have a board of elections. Basically, what this body is going to do is maintain the municipality's voter rolls, so when you register to vote, they're the ones who put you in the system. If you die, they take you out. And if you move, they change it, they keep it up to date, so there's always an accurate list of all of the voters. And they also put on the elections, so they're the ones who recruit the volunteers, set everything up. At the end of the night, they're the ones who count all of the votes up and report those. And they'll keep a record also of all election results. Where to vote. So if you've ever voted before, you've probably gone to a pretty familiar place close by. Usually it'll be a school or a community center. In my case, it is my elementary school, so it's always nice to go back and take a little visit on election day. If you want to know exactly where your polling place is, an easy way to do that is to go to vote.org and click on Polling Place Locator. That'll redirect you to a page that has a link for each state. Click on your state, put in your zip code or address, and it'll show you exactly where it is. Like I said, it'll be somewhere close and it'll be somewhere familiar to you. How to vote? There are a few different methods. If you go in on election day to cast a vote, chances are you're either going to be operating with a paper ballot or a voting machine. A paper ballot is essentially like a Scantron test. You get it, you have a little bubble next to each candidate's name, you fill it in, and you feed it into the machine at the end, and that'll tally all of the votes. A voting machine is like a little booth. One old-fashioned kind is what I have here. You kind of punch them all in, pull a lever, and that releases. There are also new electronic ones that some people use. It's kind of like if you've ever gone to a fast food restaurant and they have an order kiosk. You just tap on what you want and it registers. The one benefit of the paper ballot is in the case of a recount, so if the margin is really close at the end, they may do a hand recount. You can see what a voter's intent is, so although it sounds pretty easy to just fill in a bubble, some people have a harder time doing that than others. So these can be examined individually, and a human rather than a machine can tally the votes. Online voting is something that's been tested out over the years, hasn't really been implemented on a large scale. There are security concerns there, but that really just involves logging in with a PIN and casting a vote right on your phone or on your computer. And most of the time you're going to vote on the day of the election. There are ways to vote before the day of the election. The most prominent one is with an absentee ballot. So if you have an excuse, if you are not going to be in your hometown at the time of the election, you can request a ballot. They send it to you, you mail it back. If you're in the military, if you're in college, if you are homebound, all of these reasons will qualify you for an absentee ballot. And another thing that is trying to be implemented now, especially in light of this coronavirus that is sweeping the nation, is vote by mail, which is essentially an absentee ballot, but for everyone, just to prevent people from leaving the house. And the last thing we need to talk about is the concept of a party affiliation. Now, in America, there are two major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. I'm not going to try and summarize what they are, what they stand for, because that does change. So what I will recommend doing is, if this is the first time you're seeing these terms, you can look them up. You can ask your parents what they mean. Your parents will certainly have opinions. And also, if you are following politics, if you're watching politicians, I recommend listening to what they have to say before going and checking what their party affiliation is, just because it's easy to have certain biases and to let that affect your perception. It's really important that we look at the people before we look at the party, just because at the end of the day, you are casting a vote for a person. But that leads me into why these affiliations exist, and it's really to get on the ballot. So the parties will nominate candidates to put on the ballot, and a voter can have a party affiliation, but many are unaffiliated. If you really strongly identify with the party, then that's reason to affiliate yourself, but you can be unaffiliated. Many people are. It does not dictate who you can vote for. It's also easy to change. You can just re-register as a different party. But why do we need to have these? And that really comes down to the distinction between primary elections and general elections. Now, a general election is what you think of on election day. It is an election between multiple candidates who belong to different parties. So each party will have one candidate for a given position running on the ballot. They endorse them, they support them, and on election day, it's really a competition between the two. The winner is going to win the election, and any registered voter, regardless of party affiliation, can cast a vote. There are also primary elections. Now, that's because in many cases, there are multiple candidates who belong to the same party who are seeking that nomination on the general election ballot. So this is just an election between people of the same party. And the winner of that is the one who will get the party's nomination and be put on this general election ballot. So it's a pre-election before the big election. And the primaries can either be open or closed. In an open primary, I can be registered with any party or no party at all. I can go and say I want the Republican ballot or the Democrat ballot and vote for the candidates I want to win the nomination. In a closed primary, you need to be affiliated with the party in order to be able to vote in their primary. So, in case you're confused, just to illustrate this, here are some ballots, paper ballots from the 2018 election in Connecticut. At the top, we have the primary ballots for both parties. And then you can see I highlighted who won. Those winners will go on to the election day ballot. Now, election day is always in November. The primary will be a few months before, and that'll really depend on the state. Here we see August was the date of this primary. And if you want to learn more about all of this, I suggest using a wonderful website. It's called ballotpedia.org. It is essentially Wikipedia for all things election related, so it has results, it has rules, it has regulations. It really will outline all of the details that you need. So you can search voting in and then whatever your state name is with Ballotpedia after. Just to show you right now, I have voting in Connecticut here. You click on the first result and you get this dashboard essentially. It'll answer a bunch of questions, it'll have dates, and it also is hyperlinked to other pages where you can get some more in-depth information. So now we're going to move on to the election schedule, and this is going to be pretty fun. And like I said before, every year is an election year. This is going to be your map that will tell you what is going to be on the ballot in each election year. So, just to refresh from our last lesson, here is a table of all elected positions in the state of Connecticut. There will be some variations in other states, but this is really what we're going off of now. And I put the term lengths next to each position, so that's how much time goes by between elections for that position. And if you don't understand what these labels on the side, on the top and on the side, those are the branches of government and the layers of government, you can go to our previous video and you can get a refresher there if you need it. But now onto this election schedule. I have laid it out in this way. And when you're thinking about elections, it's really important to get in the habit of thinking in terms of 4-year blocks. So I have blocked out the next 4 years. Any block of 4 years will have 2 even and 2 odd numbers. It doesn't matter what you start with. It can be even, odd, as I have, or odd, even. You have 2 even and 2 odd. And the evens are going to be very important here because each one is going to correspond with a different kind of election. And if you're not sure what that means, I've labeled them right here. We have a presidential election every 4 years on an even number year, and on that other even number year 2 years after, we have a midterm election. The presidential election, as you probably can infer, is where we elect the president, and the midterm election is just midway through the president's term, so we have other positions up there, and they're going to alternate. So every other even-numbered year is going to be either presidential, midterm, and so on. And a way that you can remember which is which, firstly, you can think about something else that operates on a 4-year alternating basis, and that is the Olympics. So if it is a Summer Olympics year, as it is this year, it's going to be a presidential election in November. The only exception would be this year. The Summer Olympics in Tokyo have been moved to 2021. This is still the presidential election year, though. And this midterm election year is going to align with the Winter Olympics, which also happen every 4 years, but on that other even-numbered year. So that's an easy way to tell them apart. Another way is the presidential election will always fall on the leap year. So that's also every 4 years. We're in a leap year. If it hits February 29th, you can look at your calendar and know, okay, it's a presidential election year. And also keeping with the theme of sports matches, the World Cup will fall on the same year as the Winter Olympics, and that will be the midterm election year. So now what we're going to do is we will go through all of the positions on this table, and we'll just fill in one by one where they fall on this schedule. And at the end, we're going to have a perfectly built schedule that you can save, you can use as a reference any year, take a look and know what's going to be on the ballot. Federal elections will be the same schedule for the entire country, so regardless of what state you live in, this is going to apply to you. And they only occur in the even-numbered years, so it's either going to be in the presidential, the midterm, or both, as we'll see. And these are the positions that we're going to be filling in. So we'll begin with the president and vice president. They're elected every 4 years in, you guessed it, the presidential election. They're elected using the Electoral College system, so we're going to go over this in greater depth in the next episode, but basically, each state has a certain number of electoral votes attached to it. These are going to correspond with the population of the state, so more populous states will have more. And on election night, when a candidate wins a state, those electoral votes get put into their total, and the first candidate with 270 electoral votes wins. It's not determined by popular vote. The electoral votes are what are going to determine who wins the presidency. And also, they run as a ticket, so that means they run as a team. And if you look at these lawn signs from the 2016 election, you see they have both the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate's name on them. You're not going to have a situation where the president from one party and the vice president from the other party are elected together. They're always going to be a package deal. So there we go. We'll put president and vice president in presidential election year, and it'll repeat. So any year in this column is going to have this president and vice president up for election, either before or after, as I have listed. Next up, we have the U.S. Senate. This is the one exception where we break from that 4-year basis. They're actually elected every 6 years. So that can be in a presidential or midterm election year. There are 100 total, 2 per state, and basically every 2 years, a third of the Senate is going to be up for election. They're elected by popular vote in the state, so whoever gets more votes in the state wins. And the way that this alternating basis works is by separating the senators into 3 different classes. So every 2 years, you have a different class of senators up, and it's basically a third, a third, a third. Every 6 years, you have the same class up for election again. And in any given state, you have your 2 senators. You're going to have them in 2 of the 3 classes, and you're also going to have 1 class where you do not have a senator from your state. So when that class is up for election, you just don't have a senator on the ballot in your state. This may be confusing, so I'm going to map it out by looking at Connecticut specifically. These are our 2 senators in the state of Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy. Let's look at when each of them was first elected. So Blumenthal was first elected in 2010. That makes him a Class 3 senator. That seat belongs to Class 3. And Murphy was elected the next time in 2012, putting him in Class 1. So in Connecticut, we do not have a senator up for election if it is a Class 2 year. 2020 is actually that Class 2 year, so we don't have one up. The other thing to note very quickly, the senator who has been holding his or her seat the longest in any given state is called the senior senator, and the other is called the junior senator. So before Chris Murphy was elected in 2010 and 2011, it was Blumenthal and another senator. So Blumenthal was the junior senator. 2 years later, Murphy is elected. He becomes the junior, Blumenthal becomes the senior, and that's always how it's going to work. And look, we just see it repeating down every 6 years. We have the same one up. And then we also have this Class 2 list of years, and that's when we have no one up. 2020 is one of those. So here's how I'm putting this in here. In any even number year, you're either going to have one senator, the other senator, or neither up for election. And it's going to alternate. I just put in 2024. So you can see over 6 years, you're going to run through all 3, and then it's just going to repeat. I bolded in Connecticut who it's going to be, whether neither the senior or the junior. But really what you have to remember is you're either going to have one of the 2 senators up, or you're going to have neither. You're never going to have both up. You're never going to go 2 consecutive even number years with no one. It's always going to be 1-1, none, 1-1, none, 1-1, none. And then we have the House of Representatives, much easier here. They are elected every 2 years, presidential and midterm elections, and the entire House, so all 435 members of the House of Representatives, go up for election at the same time every 2 years. There are no classes to divide them up. Very easy. And a congressman or congresswoman is elected by a district of 787 people. Each state is divided into districts, so the more populous states will have more districts, and whoever wins the popular vote in that district becomes the representative. If you want to find out what district you're in or who your representative is, you can just Google "who's my representative." Click on this first result from the house.gov. You can put in your zip code and it'll tell you who it's going to be and what district you're in. So there we go. Both even number election years, we can put in U.S. representative. And you know, if it's an even numbered year, you're going to have your representative up for election. Now we're moving on to state elections. And these are going to differ by state. The positions up for election will be different in each state slightly. But I'm going to talk about Connecticut now. I'm also going to speak about, if you don't live in Connecticut, how you can find the exact information for yourself. So you don't have to finish this video, just wait until I tell you where to go, and then you can go off, you can do that, you can get your answers, and you're good. So in Connecticut, these state elections will also only be occurring on even-numbered years. In some states, I know New Jersey will elect its governor in an odd-numbered year, so that's something that you need to learn by looking it up yourself. And if you are in this position, go to ballotpedia.org once again, or you can search your state name with Ballotpedia right after. And see, I have New Jersey up here. I search that, the first result comes up. You click on that and you get a lovely dashboard here that will show you all of the different positions. It'll show you all of the different election years. You can click on either one and see when that position is up for election or who is up for election in any given year, and it'll fill in all of the blanks. But in terms of Connecticut, we're going to move forward, and we're going to see a lot of parallels between the state level and the federal level, so this will be quicker to go through. There's less explaining to do. Governor and lieutenant governor are elected every 4 years, but they're elected in the year that the president is not elected in. So you alternate between president, governor every 2 years. It's the midterm election year. It's that Winter Olympic year, that World Cup year. We call it a state or statewide election in Connecticut as well, because we have the head of our state up for election, elected by popular vote, and they also run as a ticket. So see this sign right here. We have the governor and the lieutenant governor running as a team. They're both going to be elected if they win. We'll put them in. It's filling in quite nicely. We also need to look at the other statewide executives. So we're not going to go through all of the details of what they do, but here, just a reminder who they are in Connecticut. They're always going to be elected when the governor is, so think about it like a cabinet of sorts. So we have this executive administration that we're going to elect every 4 years. That's going to include the governor, the lieutenant governor, and also these other statewide executives. Midterm election, popular vote in state, they'll each run individually, so we'll have all 4 of these on the ballot. And there we go, we put it in there. So if we take a look right here, we have a good alternation. At the top of the ticket, we have the president, we have the governor, and we're going to go back and forth in these even years. Senator, 2/3 of the time will be on the ballot with each, 1/3 of the time will not, and we're always going to have that U.S. representative if it's an even-numbered year. And similarly to the U.S. representative, we have our state legislatures. So in the General Assembly, which is the Connecticut State Legislature, we have 2 different houses, the State Senate and the House of Representatives. The biggest difference here is how the districts are divided. So a state senator is going to cover a bigger district with more people. A state representative will have a smaller one, and there are 36 versus 151, so that shows you there. And they're also going to all be elected at once, every 2 years. So exactly the same as the U.S. House of Representatives, we're going to have both houses of the state legislature up for election. Again, in those even-numbered years. And lastly, the probate court. This is the only judicial position that we elect in Connecticut. The others are all appointed. If you live in another state, you may have many more of these, but in Connecticut, the probate court judge is elected every 4 years in that midterm or statewide election. So if the governor's on the ballot, so is this probate court judge. And this is also divided into districts. There are 54 of them. And we put that down. So here we have all of our federal and state positions. They're only occupying these even-numbered columns, though, so you may be wondering, I said earlier, every year is an election year. Right now, in looking at this, it doesn't seem like that. We have these odd-numbered election years that will be in between all of the even ones. What do we do there? And the answer is, we vote on our municipal positions. So, in case you need a refresher on what the municipal positions are, I have some examples here. These will vary by your town, so every town in Connecticut will have a charter, and it'll lay out what the form of government is, and that'll dictate who is going to be up for election during these municipal years. So you may live in a city that has a mayor that is elected every 4 years. You may live in a small town that has a council that you elect every 2 years. We're going to go into how to find that out in a later lesson, but just know that these are the odd-numbered elections. They're still very important, but because they are the only ones on the ballot in the odd-number election years in Connecticut, they don't receive the same attention that the even-numbered years do. The way we can think about that is, it's a presidential election year. You turn on the TV, you have debates, you have interviews, all of the major news outlets will be covering it. You really can't ignore it, and you know that the election will be coming up. In this midterm election, it's not as widely publicized, but still there is a lot of talk on TV. In Connecticut especially, we have tons of commercials. You can't be watching one of the major networks without seeing governor commercials, without seeing attorney general commercials. They'll just run commercials because they're running for positions that cover the entire state. So you can just buy advertising statewide and easily show your message to viewers across Connecticut. But in a municipal election, it's on a very small scale. You're not going to have the same widespread coverage, so a lot of people don't even know that it's happening. Unless you really follow your local newspaper or on Facebook, you like your local candidates, it's really going to be hard to know who's running, what the positions are, and that it's even an election year. So if you're watching this video, remember that. Remember, on those odd number years, there is an election happening, and do your part to find out who is running, what they're running for, and try to go vote as well. We can see all elections are not created equal, and the best way to see that is by looking at voter turnout. Now, voter turnout is a percentage, and it's calculated by dividing the number of registered voters who voted in a given election over the total number of registered voters. It's not the total population. So right now we're going to be looking at the Connecticut voter turnout in the last 4 elections, and they correspond exactly with the ones under them. So you can just look straight down and see what was voted on in those elections and what the turnout is in the state of Connecticut. So we can see presidential election year. This has the highest turnout. 77% of registered voters in Connecticut voted in 2016. Then if we look 2 years later to 2018, we had this midterm election. It was also a statewide election, as it is in Connecticut. 65% of registered voters voted, so notice that is less than voted 2 years earlier. There are about 10% of voters who voted in 2016 and did not in 2018. These people, we can presume, just voted because there was a president up for election, and that's all they cared about. But then we look to our sides and we see these municipal elections. And we have 30 in 2017, 34% in 2019. That's about a third of registered voters. A lot less than we have in the presidential and even the midterm election years. All of these people who did go and vote, we know they can do it. We know they have the capacity to do it. Just stayed home the next year. Maybe they didn't even know there was an election. The municipal elections do matter, so please keep that in mind. Take a screenshot, take a picture, save it, make it your wallpaper, but know that if there is an election coming up, which there always is in November, this is going to be your guide. This is going to tell you what will be on the ballot, and you can do your homework before. You can search all of these positions and find out who is running. You can look at their Facebook pages. You can read articles on them. You can read interviews with them. And when you go and vote, you can know what you're voting for, because some people will go in to vote, and it's good that they do that, but they won't even know who the people are on the ballot. And you don't want to be one of those people. So here we have it. We have finished our second lesson on elections and voting. Now, this lesson and the one before really cover the foundations, and what we're going to do moving forward is look at each group in some more depth look at who is actually holding these positions, looking at what specifically they're doing. So thank you for sticking with us. Again, this was a very important episode. Like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and please share with everyone. This is information that everyone should know. How do I close